understand this, okay? Baseball doesn't. They're very fussy about who comes and plays at their table. Think of it as a big poker game. They don't want someone to come in and spend a ton of money, which is why they didn't want Cuban in, because they thought Cuban could become someone like a Steinbrenner, who was going to come in and spend a fortune on free agents. They don't want that guy. They want someone who's going to play ball. They want you to spend some money, but they don't want you to be crazy and drive them crazy by spending for a ton of free agents. So they want to be limited in that regard. Number two, they want you to be able to ante up. And I know a guy who was in there once, and he was in there kind of on a shoestring, and somebody said to him, one of the owners said to him, "Hey, if you don't have the chips, you don't belong in this game." And that's how they look at it now. And the price, the value of the franchises has become so extreme. You're talking about billions of dollars. You're not talking about millions of dollars anymore. You're talking about billions of dollars. And while I know people think, oh, there's a gazillion billionaires, there's not. There's not. And as I've said to you before, I do not think there is an athlete. I'm not talking about international athletes who I know nothing about, soccer players or somebody like that. There might be. I don't know anything about the soccer players because they might live in a place where they don't pay taxes, and they could live in Monte Carlo. I have no idea. But if you take the guys in major sports in America, there is not a player yet who I think is a billionaire. I don't think there is one. And I think that includes Jordan. And Jordan has had, A, he's been in ownership a while, and B, he's had an incredible run with Nike. And I don't think he's yet a billionaire. He might be the only one. And think about that. That's Michael Jordan, who has had an incredible success with his sneakers and has been in ownership now for a long time. But if you're thinking about A-Rod or Tom Brady or any of these guys, Derek, any of them, they're not close. They're not close. So they have to go out and get a guy. And these plans they want to be the front guy because that's the fun part of owning the team is, they want to be the player wants to be the front guy. But you still have to have a guy who's got the cash so that you don't have to borrow all the money for the team. So you got to have a guy there who's worth $1 billion without going to the bank. And that's tricky. Now, are there guys? Heck yeah. You want to go convince an owner from another sport? Most of them don't want to be in baseball. I'm telling you, unless Dolan changed his mind, Dolan told me he would never buy a baseball team. I asked him once, and he said to me, "I'll never buy a baseball team." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because He goes, "I like to watch my teams play, and I don't want to be locked in to watch my team play in the summertime. I want to do what I want to do in the summertime. I don't want to be locked in. I go to my team's games for basketball, which he does, hockey, which he does." And he said, "I don't." And this is what he told me. He told me this a couple of years ago. One time I was sitting around somewhere, and I asked him about buying, owning a baseball team. Now, he's wanted a baseball team for his network for a while. We know that. But he doesn't want to own a baseball team. He could afford one, but he doesn't want one. Crafts came up the other day. I would doubt very much the Crafts would get involved in baseball. I would. First of all, they're not baseball people. They were football people, and they hit it big with the Pats. But remember, they borrowed a bunch of money to buy the Pats when they did. And they've hit it big, and the franchises have exploded since then, and they've done a great job monetizing and winning, both on the field and off the field. They've done a very smart job with their franchise. No one can dispute that. Mr. Kraft's done a very good job in that regard. No one could dispute that. But what you need is these Wall Street types who want to put in the money, but, most of those guys are going to be like Tepper, or they're going to be like Steve Cohen. They're going to want to run the franchise, which you would too. Or if you went and got Rapoli, he's going to want to run the franchise. He's not going to be the second banana. He's going to be the lead guy. They're going to want to run the franchise. That's who they are. Those guys are bosses. They've made their money. They're going to want to run the franchise. They're not going to buy it and let someone else run it. Finding that guy's rare. You might find a silent guy who thinks it's a good investment that way and goes with it, but I doubt he'll be putting in $3 billion or $2 billion under those circumstances. Now, you maybe only need him. You get a whole bunch of smaller investors. You only need them to put in. Because you remember, when George owned the team, George used to keep the ownership of his team in the high 50s percentile. And then he had a lot of 4% owners. And if you're used to looking ever look in a Yankee Guide through the years, and you'd see that you had the Niederlander family had 4%, and Lester Crown had 3 or 4%, and Goldklang had 3 or 4%, and this one had 3% or 2%, and it all added up. And then George had 58% or 59% or 61%, depending on what he had. But he never had 100%. Al Davis did the same thing. Al Davis was managing general partner. So was George. He was the lead guy. Al Davis was the same way. When Al Davis put the Raiders, he didn't have any money. He didn't have the money to buy the franchise. He got in there. He got a stake. He got his 30%. He got in there. He ran his partners out, and then he owned the franchise. Being partners with Al was probably not a great idea, to be honest with you. It was not a thing. But, if you come in and, if you're someone who comes in and buys a franchise that has a lot of money, like the Bartolos came in and bought Al Davis was the guy who brought Mr. DeBartolo into the league. They had a ton of money. They come in, and they made a big splash, as an example. So most of those guys are going to come now from Wall Street. That's where the money is. And they're going to want to make a splash. Wouldn't you? If you're going to put $1 billion into something of your own money and then have a bunch of smaller investors around it, you're going to want to, be the guy. So to get a player like an A-Rod, to find a rich guy to be the money man, to be the anchor, and also be quiet and be behind the scenes, that's hard to find. Those guys are going to be few and far between, I would